Antoinette Gooden of Lorne, and Blanche de Grishay of Gravel Hill. Ask that we have a moment of silence. Thank you, everyone. We move on to the adoption of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda as presented? Yep, just go ahead. Let me get you. Yep, go ahead, Paul. Go ahead.
It's going to delete mine. I only have one. Delete it.
Delete yours?
Yeah.
Okay. Delete Paul's. Okay. No other changes? We have a motion to adopt the agenda with the amendment. Motion 2096. I'm having trouble with this system. Okay. I'm going to try something different here. This one. Moved by Nick, second by Tracy. Questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against, nay. Motion carried. Is there anyone with a conflict of interest in the agenda? If not, we'll move on to the adoption of the minutes. Motion 2097 for June the 1st and June the 15th be adopted as presented. Mover and a seconder, please.
I move that the minutes of the Committee of Whole Council meeting of June 1st, 2020 and the regular meeting of June 15, 2020 be adopted as presented.
Second by Tracy. Questions? No questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against, nay. Motion carried. Okay, we'll move down to statements by members of Councillor. Councillor Arsenault has been removed. Councillor Davenport.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this statement might be a little late in coming, but we all know that Maritime Iron had a really good proposal for an economic uplift to our, not only the village, but to our region. I think they had a very sound proposal. They did very good legwork in getting to the point where I think most of the region was comfortable with the progress and with the proposal. I think they did very good public relations work in making most people, I think, supportive of the project. And we all know that if this would have happened, it would have prolonged the life of NB Power beyond proposed 2030 drop dead date for the Beldoon facility. And it looked like negotiations were going well, and all of a sudden the headline in the newspaper says NB Power pulls out. And this is, and have to remember that Maritime Iron had already filed an environmental assessment report because it was, which showed that there were probably going to be considerable carbon emissions from that plant, which would have contributed to the overall provincial levels and put us in on the wrong side of where we wanted to be. But from a global perspective, I think it was proven over and over again that the impacts would be very positive. And all of a sudden, NB Power decides that they don't want to have anything to do with it anymore. I don't know the inside of the story, obviously. I'm not part of the negotiations, and probably a good thing. And maybe NB Power was justified in deciding that they didn't want to be part of it anymore. I assume there would have been a cost associated with the overhaul of NB Power to accommodate the whatever they were going to get from Maritime Iron. So that might have been somewhat understandable, but when Maritime Iron came back and suggested that maybe they just buy the power plant in Baldoon, and it was pretty much outright denied as not even up for consideration, it really makes me wonder how sincere the people who make the decisions are about the economic well-being of our region. Because if Maritime Iron had the guts to take on or to buy Baldoon coal-fired generating station, I would have thought in a heartbeat that was just the way to go. That was going to be the cat's meow for everybody. And so I was so disappointed to hear that idea was pretty much thrown out as quickly as it was presented, unless it still breathes life, but I haven't heard anything. And I guess what really disappoints me is that all of the leadership of northern and northeastern New Brunswick have been we haven't heard anything. We haven't heard any kind of rebuttal, not even an expression of disappointment that this seems to be stalled, whether it's temporarily or permanently. And I think we need to do better, and I think our citizens expect better. When Glencore closed last year, the government was so quick to create this transition committee. Haven't heard a thing from the transition committee. You figure that this would have fallen in their lap and they would have said, this is what we're going to run with. Haven't heard a thing. So where is the transition committee on all of this? To say that I'm disappointed, and I'm sure that members of council share my disappointment, that would be an understatement. But we need some action. And I feel so confident that if this exact situation was in the southern part of the province, taking no for an answer would not be acceptable. And I think we just need to be much more vocal in expressing our disappointment and expressing our demands that, look, here's something that is a very viable project. 1,300 jobs for 2 years during the construction phase, 200 permanent jobs after that, a global reduction in carbon emissions, and they say it's a bad idea. When there are so many obvious solutions to get to where we need to be, we need to let Maritime Iron know that we're on their side, and we need to put up a better fight on their behalf, I think, than we have so far. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. The transition committee, just to kind of bring you up to speed, will be putting a report out relatively soon, so they're well aware of this and have been working to get things moving on it as well. Anyone have any questions for Nick? Tracy.
It's not a question. I was just going to kind of reiterate what Nick said about, because the first thing in my mind was, where was the transition committee on this? And where are we with Donald Arsenault? Because we had hired him as well to do some economic development and get things going as well. So I'm wondering where he is on this as well.
Okay, we'll try and get some of that information. Stanley.
Just as a quick update there, I can circle back with Donald Arsenault. I know that a lot of things went to the wayside over the last couple months, but I'll reach out to him, get a little update, ask him to put something together for council.
Stanley, yep.
I've had recent contact with Don. It's the main push that we had asked him to do was to try to ensure that $400,000 backstop, or at least a decreased inflow of that. Of course, that was before the pandemic and before our province was $1 billion over budget. So the odds of that are probably not likely. The impression I got from the conversation was that there wasn't any appetite from the Higgs government to see this project go forward. Take it what you want from a Liberal, but it definitely did seem, I never saw any evidence to the contrary from the Higgs government. I would say, just in terms of wanting economic development and stuff like that, to Nick's point, those were all very wonderful things. I think we needed to probably temper our expectations a little bit on Maritime iron. They're coming in with a license agreement from the Korean manufacturer of the technology. That was all they had. They did not have the money to set up a plant. They were not going to break ground the next day and then there'd be boots on the ground. They needed to raise the $1.5 billion to build that plant. So it wasn't like it was a sure thing, but it is sad to see opportunities go. But it just goes further on to institute that Northern New Brunswick's a place where you can't seek out those kind of ventures. As far as the transition committee, I've seen the final report already. I'll let it speak for itself when it comes out. It's not anything we haven't heard already. And definitely, I don't think is reflective of the change in dynamics that have happened over the last few months.
Okay, good, thank you, Sandon. Okay, we'll move on. Councillor Killorn.
So I guess it's back to me. So the commercial tax rate, I'm trying to look at which camera, it's that camera. Okay. The commercial tax rate is not calculated like everybody's residential tax rate, so it's something that I think everybody in Belledune needs to be cognizant about, is that it doesn't necessarily mean the way your property is assessed is the value of your home and the value of your property is assessed for a certain value and you're taxed based on that. In the industrial tax center, the big thing is that it takes that into account, but then there's also the operational capacity that you've reached. And this is a really important factor because not only are we, unless the mayor has had conversations with the provincial government that I'm not aware of, not only are we in danger of losing that backstop that we had last year from Glencore, which would represent $400,000. MB Power hasn't been operating to capacity for, nigh on 6-7 months now. Well, they haven't been producing power. The plant has been shut down, which means that they're not operating at a cost. And from what I've heard from my contacts in Fredericton, there is an application going in for a reassessment of the tax dollars. Whether or not that's the case, they'd be silly not to. They just released their audited reports showing that they're deep, deep in the red after last year's operations, and anything that can save them money will look good on the new CEO. That being said, $400,000 from, unless the province has found it in the couch cushions to stop our backstop, plus an unknown amount from MB Power that they should get back. Literally, they should. It's legitimate. If your house decreased in value, you should also get a rebate on your tax rate. It's not an evil thing that they would do if they did it. But what we should be looking at is $1 million in a difference of in revenue for this year. That being said, we don't have $1 million item that we can cut from the budget and have it be really clean. So what I'm proposing is that we do something that Clerk Treasurer Cormier informed me has never been done in the village of Belledune, and that we start from scratch on a brand new budget. Every year we've gone in and numbers for minimum standards have been presented to us, saying this is how much it costs to run X, Y, and Z, different line items, and we don't get any insight into what actually makes up those costs. I'm not saying they're not legitimate. I'm not saying that we won't end up having to bear them anyway, but the fact is if you never review something, you never realize whether or not you need it. So one thing I think will resonate with everybody is your Netflix subscription. You don't think about it, but it's always there, charging you $14 a month, and you don't even notice it come off the books. Well, when you're a municipality and you have expenditures in the tune of, $3 to $4 million a year, there's a good chance that there's more than a couple of those items that can be rolled back. That's the point of a zero-based budgeting approach. That's what I would really like us to see doing, and what you do is you go department by department, and you justify every dollar that's going to be spent. It's a long process. It's a hard process, but, you know, we've had conversations at previous council meetings, both online and here. So that's how far back it's been going, that we want independent audits and more transparency into the bills of projects and stuff like that. Well, this is actually the hard work that goes into having those kinds of answers. So yes, it's very easy to be spoon-fed a budget that we rubber stamp at the end of the year and make a few discretionary choices on. That's not going to be the case this year. I'm hoping that that won't be the case this year, because there are cuts that need to be made, and there are uncertainties going forward, obviously with the global pandemic, operation reduction at MB Power, the smelter being closed down, and Maritime Iron seeming to be on its last ropes. And that's what I have to say on that topic.
Okay, thank you, Sandon. Just to add, with, from the province, our losses from the smelter was going to be in the range of about $308,000. There's nothing other than that they're aware of that was going to reduce our taxes. So we're looking at probably a loss of about $300,000 at this point in time. So we with that in mind, that's kind of what we should be looking at. And as we go into the budget, of course, we'll certainly get updates from the province, just so you're aware. And I understand your concern with a zero-based budget, but we have a system in place now that works for us. Our expenditures for policing, DTI, there's a number of expenditures that we don't have any discretionary over. It's what the province tells us we're going to pay, and we're going to continue to pay that. So, and a zero budget process is a long, hard process, and it brings out, it'll probably end up bringing out the same results as we have now. We do have really, when our books are audited, they're audited twice. They're audited by an auditor, which we appoint as a council, and then they're also audited by the provincial government before they approve our budget. As we do a budget, we send it to the province, we get it approved. Once it's approved, it comes back, the auditors go through it as well. So there's checks and balances in there, and there are probably some places we can look at, but other than that, but anyway, that's my take on it, and I'll open the floor to anyone else.
Okay, yes, I was going to say pretty much the same. What the mayor was saying is that we have numbers that basically we need to bring up every year. It works well. I would like to keep it. You have here also that you want to start it in August. August, there's a lot of people on vacation. It's not time to start a budget, and I heard this zero budget is a long, drug-out work. I think it's late in the game right now to start from zero. So that's, and I've already made arrangements to start the budget process in September, where everybody's back in full swing. So, and like Joey say, the $1 million is far from the 300 that he's saying, so we'll only have our numbers probably at a later date. I never heard anything about MB Power cutting back or anything like that, but yeah, I would like to stay with what we're doing now. That's just my say on that.
Just wanted to say it's like I've heard over the last, couple of months, a range, everywhere from 300,000 to obviously $1 million, and that obviously is going to implicate or is going to determine how we do this. So I'm not sure how soon we can get those solid numbers, but the sooner the better, because it's obviously going to make a big impact. Trying to be able to make up $300,000 is a heck of a lot different than trying to make up $1 million. So until we sort of get a figure, we really don't know what we can do. And I don't know how soon we can get it, but obviously the sooner the better.
No, sorry, Landon wanted to go.
Sorry, and I'm assuming, Sandon, you're probably just going to address everything all at the same time. I've never gone through the process of a zero-based budget. Concept-wise, I know what it is. One of the questions that I did have is that, would there be a chance that if the money was not allocated, that we might potentially miss out on opportunities down the road? Or is that other funding or budgeting potentially available? Do you know how that would work?
So I'm going to ask a little bit of clarification on your question. So do you mean if, like, we go through the zero-based budget and we've cut enough out and then we need to get it back because the intent is there?
Yeah, so something like, let's say, as an example, let's say Rec and Wellness. Let's say we ask our Rec and Wellness coordinator to start itemizing stuff that we're going to plan for, and then we allocate that budget. If there's an opportunity for him for something, in the next fiscal year, but he doesn't have that in his budget, or is there still some flexibility where we would be able to capitalize on that, or are we limited to?
Well, there is in a way, the point of a zero-based budget is not to, we should end up at the same amount as, and I've been told this on numerous occasions, the village isn't a business. So it's not just to save money, it's to make the budget balance, right? So we need to be able to end up at the same amount. Now, if that's some discretionary funds and stuff like that, that's fine. I mean, that's putting it in there, but we know. Like, we got ripped apart in this room about office supplies getting bought in Bathurst instead of at Hilliard's. I don't care. Honestly, I'm not running. I don't care. But here's the reality of the case. I don't know where we do buy our office supplies. I don't know how much a year we spend on them, and I don't know how often we're replacing stuff. There's over $1 million in general government, and when I look through the audited statements, which I did, the only description it gives us is the roles. That's it. And there's not $1 million in salary there. There is almost $500,000 in money that's earmarked into large line items that we have, that I personally, and we've asked for it before and we haven't got it, but I personally do not have an itemized list that I can point to and say, this is where that $200,000 went this year, this is where this $50,000 went this year, this is where this $1,000 went last year. That's the point of a zero-based budget. Yes, we may get to the same point. That's the worst case scenario. The best case scenario is that we go through the entire process and we find a whole bunch of things that we're paying for that we don't need to be paying for. And that we've freed up money, do we want to do raises next year? It's going to be pretty tough. Do we want to hold on to all of our employees? Well, if I'm telling you right now that there's almost $500,000 that I shouldn't say $500,000. There's a couple $100,000 in general government that I don't know exactly where it's going. Well, that might be enough to hold on to, say, 10 employees or however many employees there are at the salmon barrier. But if the village doesn't want to do the work to go through the zero-based budget, and what I heard mostly is that it's a lot of work, then you guys run on that.
Yeah, I think those figures and those facts are out there if you want them. Anytime I've ever asked for them, I've certainly got them, so I'm not too concerned about not knowing where the money is going, that's for sure. Paul?
Well, just one thing, I think through last year, I think I've mentioned quite a few times how it would be very, very nice to be able to have more details on loss or money going in, money coming out, and where it's going, and all that stuff that I think Councillor Cloran just mentioned. I'm for anything that allows us to do that in a more detailed way, for sure. I guess my biggest worry is that we assume an amount. Let's say it's $1 million. We assume that amount. And then we start chopping things, and then all of a sudden we realize, hey, you know what? We're not there. We're at 300,000 as opposed to $1 million. what do we do then? Do we go back and start dialing people up and saying, hey, and now I'm being facetious, I'm asking, if we go through that and we get to that point where we've budgeted for $1 million loss, and then we find out that we're not at $1 million loss, we're at, say, 350,000, and we've made all the cuts, and some of those cuts are to staffing, or some of those cuts are to programs, how do we go then and get that back?
Okay. So that's a really good point, and there's a miscommunication there about the point of zero-based budgeting. Zero-based budgeting isn't to make those cuts already, right? It's you go through and you justify every dollar, right? So if we're justifying every jobs, we can play with the scenario in that budget that it's going to be $300,000. Okay, it's going to be $400,000, or even the worst-case scenario, $1 million, right? And let's be honest, as Glencore decommissions, regardless of whether it's $400,000 or $1 million this year, that value will go down as well. So, I mean, in future budgets, it's also going to go down. But you don't have to, by doing zero-based budget, it doesn't mean you cut everybody and you can only bring them back through a special motion of council. It's you build up the budget, and then basically what you've done is you've justified everybody to, we lost $300,000, right? And you justify everything you expend, or, you know, you justify everything up to that $1 million. So you say there's a potential that we might lose $750,000 next year. So every dollar up to that has to be justified. Then you keep going. So you get to the point where it's $300,000, right? And then in that scenario, you run that budget. It's just drawing a line on in the grid.
I just have a little something to say. I'm sorry, I didn't say that it was a lot of work. I'm thinking it's late in the budget year to start a zero-point budget. It's, and especially with August, with vacation time, so we're kind of running out of time because the budget needs to be in, I believe in October this year. Brenda, am I right?
The provincial government has got an amendment to the act right there now that allows them to, we'd have to have it in by November 15th.
So we need to have the budget in a month earlier, and that's the thing. It's kind of late to change the way we do the budget and the way we have it now. And I'm sure that anything that we ask Brenda for, that she will bring it forward to us if we have. I know anytime I've asked her questions, she brings me the information I require. So that's my point on that.
Anyone else?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A lot to think about. I think both scenarios are. It does remind me that someday I think it's a good idea to do an evaluation of everything we do, not just from a budgetary perspective, but from a public works perspective, from everything we do and the expenditures that are associated with those things. And I've said for years that if we were not careful, we were going to end up in Dalhousie's shoes, because they had so much riding on that pulp mill there. And I said, just before that closed, I remember telling my wife, if that pulp mill ever closed, Dalhousie, for all intents and purposes, is screwed. That was over 10 years ago, and Dalhousie is still trying to find its feet. And we are getting there. We've lost Glencore, no replacement. We're going to lose NB Power at some point unless somebody smartens up and makes some very good decisions. So we're going to be in a very difficult situation. And we've emphasized year after year after year that we wanted to deliver all kinds of services, all worthwhile services, but charge nothing or very little for them. That's a concept that simply cannot continue. It cannot continue in perpetuity. But I think we're still thinking that it can. But we're right at the point now where all of those things and how we operate from A to Z is going to have a really good reevaluation. And I'm not sure if we as a council can do it, or if that needs to be done by an external evaluation or examination. But I just know for sure that we have to be careful. We're talking about $300,000. That's not a whole lot of money. $1 million becomes much more money. But are they just stepping stones to where we're going to be left with sawmill, and assume that the sawmill is going to cover everything that we've lost from the other ones. Our approach has, I think, on an awful lot of things that we do, has to be very much different than the way we've done it up to now, because it's not going to be business as usual from here on in. As far as how we do our budget, I'm kind of fine either way. There's an element of curiosity that suggests that the zero-based one would be an interesting exercise, but maybe not for me, because there'd probably be more details in that, and I'm not really a details-oriented person. I'm not sure if I've ever said that before. But I'm sure that there would be a lot of interesting information derived from going through that exercise. At the same time, I agree that there are a lot of, at this point, we assume, and I think rightfully so, that there are a lot of non-discretionary aspects to the budget, and I'm not sure how you would address that with on a zero-based budget process. But there's going to be lots to think about. We'll need to be open-minded on a whole lot of things and say that in the very near future, it's not going to be business as usual. It can't be. It can't be.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Anyone else? Anything else? Okay, Sandon, you're next.
Oh, I'll
Oh,
just give
sorry,
my,
okay, go
yeah,
ahead,
it's
Tracy.
okay, it's okay, I'll just give my 2 cents. I don't think there's anything wrong with looking at all the numbers from scratch. I am worried about a time frame, though. If it's something that we want to do, I can't help but think that after we get this budget done is when it should start immediately right after that. So then we know exactly where our numbers are. And then the whole year to work on it, not this council, but the following council. It's not only the time that it takes to do this budget, but we're also having to learn how to do this budget at the same time. So it's learning at the same time as trying to do it. So that's not always an easy process either. So I've trusted our budget. I trust our clerk treasurer with the numbers that we've gotten. And I'll repeat what others have anytime that I need a breakdown on something. I've always received it. So I'm not against the zero-based budget, but the timeline is what really concerns me. So.
Okay, thank you, Tracy. Sandy.
Yeah, and I think I'll just close that. I'm thankful that everybody is willing to come in and have a conversation about the premise, and I understand I guess the time constraint argument. It does seem like, we might be up against it, but I mean, keep in mind, it's July. If we started August, you've got 3.5 months, weekly meetings, you can get something like that done. And organizations, Moncton does this. Not every year, obviously, but they set terms and then they review everything because obviously they're looking to reduce waste. Because the last thing they want to do is lay people off. The last thing they want to do is unnecessarily have to raise taxes, right? So this is the first big hit Belledune's had in a very long time, right? So in my opinion, and I'm glad that everybody had the conversation with me, the due diligence of doing a zero-based budget, and maybe the next one's only 10 years away, or maybe after the next, 10 years away, it's 2030, that's the end of the power plant if nothing else happens. Might force it anyway. But I'd go to sleep easier at night knowing that I looked through the numbers, combed through everything, and made sure that there was no place that, instead of going to Kent to get something, we set up deliverable orders so we didn't have to pay out mileage, which equals a couple $1,000s a year, and we find 1 or 2 more things of that nature, and then we can keep somebody on staff during the summer, right? That's how easy that is when you break it all down into individual pieces. And I would sleep better, especially leaving council, I would sleep better, having this list for the next council to be able to act upon.
Paul.
Just one final thought for me too. I was just thinking, I had talked a while ago about how if you budgeted for a $1 million loss and then only had 300,000, that could be trouble, but it can also be trouble if you budgeted for a $300,000 loss and it was $1 million. So, you know, this is not going to be easy. This is going to be very, very difficult. But I think the right intentions are there, and that's the most important thing. It's going to be a tough one, but we'll try to get it right.
Okay, thank you, Paul. I think the important thing is that all of us as councillors got to sit around the table and say, put our heads together and say, where do we want to go with this and what do we got to do? And what's the best route to take? And we, you know, we haven't had that conversation in the past, and over the last few budgets that we did, there was two or three of us and that would sit and do most of the budget, and then a couple others would sit in. But I think this has to be all of council sitting around the table, everybody having their say and everybody having their input, and you know, any information they need, that needs to be got for them. And I think we can, you know, make things work, but we have to do it as a unified group. Okay. Next, Sandon?
Okay, the next one I have is just on, I was hoping that we kind of reach a unanimous consent and have our first budget meeting in August. The one thing, and I won't even present it as a motion, but more of a public request, and here's what it is. Councillor Carmichael has been on the budget committee for a long time. Our numbers have been steady enough that no necessary cuts have had to be made. Sorry. So Councillor Carmichael has been on the Finance Committee since we started doing it, which was our second or third year. I'm not sure, second year, I think. And she's done a very good job, and I want to commend her for all the effort that she's put into it. And as I said when I originally reached out to her, the input she provides is valuable, and this is not me trying to kick her off of a committee that she likes. Unfortunately, no matter with such a large amount, and even if it's the minimum of $308,000, there is the potential that there could be cuts to staff, which unfortunately Councillor Carmichael has a conflict in terms because of our operations of the salmon barrier and her husband. So in an ideal situation, and we've said this before, well, she'll just step out when we're discussing the salmon barrier. The only way that that would work is that if, while she was out, we decided to cut the salmon barrier or to cut jobs from the salmon barrier. That way she didn't have any involvement in that discussion. But then the people at the salmon barrier should be upset because, you know, that's the only way that it could have went. Because if we cut somewhere else, regardless of whether or not she means to, and I know she doesn't, if I'm one of the arena workers, and $300,000, even $300,000 is a nice round number when you think of the arena. If I'm one of the arena workers and I lose my job next year, and I know that the salmon barrier stayed open, and that Lillian had a part to do, or sorry, Councillor Carmichael had a main role in developing that budget, I'm suing for wrongful termination because of conflict of interest. It's not that I believe that she would purposefully do it. I don't. I think she would go in and do a good job, and if the hard decision came down to cut the salmon barrier, she would. But that's not the important thing. The important thing is perceived conflict. We're asked every single meeting if we have a conflict of interest in the agenda. And unfortunately, no matter how you spin it, whether we cut the salmon barrier or whether we cut somewhere else, if it's a program, well, somebody liked that program. Why didn't you cut the salmon barrier? They only made $500, right? It's not fair to the salmon barrier, it's not fair to any of the other programs, and there is a perceived conflict of interest. And as we've learned on our first getaway trip with the council, perceived conflict is almost as bad as it being a direct conflict. And if any of the measures that we have to work with next year result in layoffs, I do not like the legal position of the village if Councillor Carmichael was not only involved, but leading the drafting of that budget.
Thank you.
I have
for that,
something
but
to say on
Just one
this.
minute, Lillian. Number one, Sandon, no other councillor can declare a councillor in conflict of interest. That's right in the Municipalities Act.
I didn't.
Number two is that as a councillor, if you read Section 48 of the Municipalities Act, all councillors have to participate in the budget and any other policies or works of the municipality. So that's in the Municipalities Act as well.
So a clarification on that then. So if we were to say budget a raise for the salmon barrier next year, just to put a more positive spin on it, legitimately Lillian can vote for her husband to get a raise.
No, she should declare a conflict of interest, but if she didn't, you couldn't tell her she's in
I'm not
conflict of
telling her,
interest.
I'm not telling her that I'm telling her that she should do it. I'm not going to declare a conflict from her. What I'm telling her is that if she decides to proceed, she's putting the village in a precarious legal position.
Well, there's lots of things we do that happen. So anyway, okay, go ahead, Lillian.
I already said by email, so I'll just make it out there. If she does participate, I'm contacting the ombudsman for a ruling.
Well, Sandon, I'm not stepping down for chair for the Finance Committee, for one thing. And I'm going to continue to recuse myself on any financial discussion regarding the barrier, as I've always done, and you know that. Anytime the barrier comes in discussion, I never give my input on it. So, and I excuse myself, and if I'm in doubt, I check, is this a conflict for me? And the mayor normally tells me, yes, it doesn't talk money, so you can stay, or yes, it's money, you can walk out. So I don't know what's the difference between this year and every other year that I've been on this committee, that why all of a sudden it's a conflict. I do realize the barrier is a conflict, and I've never stepped over my boundaries on that. So I am staying as chair if the other councilors is okay with me on that.
Okay, thank you, Lillian. Sandon.
Again, the first thing I did off my statement was I lauded your previous work on the Finance Committee. And like I said, it wasn't meant to cause animosity, but you have to acknowledge that if we need to cut $300,000, right? And it's a significant cut. It's not tinkering a little bit here, a little bit there, which even in itself, strictly speaking, probably could have been conceived if someone really wanted to do it. Your neighbor to your left can tell you all about perceived conflict of interest, but and what that can do. But when it's this big of a chunk of money, if you cut somewhere, you're saving somewhere else. So as long as someone can make the argument that you should have cut in the salmon barrier, you were involved in it, there was a conflict of interest, they're going to have a pretty good legal case. And that's it. And for you to just step aside for the budget process, because like the mayor said, the last couple of years, it's just been me, you, and him developing it, and people come in at the end to add comments and factors. It's not like we wouldn't be doing it again. But I'm not trying to impugn the work that you've done in the past. It's been admirable and very, very good. What I'm saying is that this new circumstance is completely different, and that with all the hardships that's going to come out of at least a recession, if not a depression in the economy, if I got laid off from my job from the village and I knew that there was a case to be made for wrongful termination, I'd be bringing that to court.
Okay, thank you. Sandon, you have one more item.
Do I? Those ones drain me, I'm not going to lie. Or less pleasant, but more energetic. The Bathurst Airport, the Northern New Brunswick Airport Authority received news at the beginning of July that Air Canada would close up its station and stop delivering the route from Bathurst to Montreal. This was met to a giant silence. There's no outrage. Nick, the anger that you have about Maritime Iron going without a whimper can only be doubled, and excruciatingly so, for my anger on the airport shutting down and not anybody saying anything about it. I understand that with COVID, that travel restrictions have been done, and maybe a suspension of flights until a later date or an indeterminate date might have been the way to go. However, that's not what they chose to do. They just chose to shut down every airport in the region. I don't think people necessarily understand how important an airport is. I was having a conversation on all of the great platforms called Facebook, and it was a home inspector that I was having this conversation with, and you know who you are. And he was talking about all the work. The bad thing that the airport did is it flew people away to work somewhere else and then come home. And he was saying that he was living a good life and he was making a good living and he was busy. And I'm happy for him because he's a good guy. But he doesn't realize that the money that's coming into the economy is at least in large part from people who were flying to Alberta or flying to Montreal and flying to the mines to keep working after the mines shut down, Glencore shut down, and things of that nature. So there's a huge swath of the population who now has to drive 3 hours to Moncton and is going to start wondering, why am I living in northern New Brunswick when when I was okay with flying to work, but now I can't even do that. As a village who requires a lot of highly skilled industrial people to work in our industrial core, wants to reinvent itself, being cut off from world hubs is not a good thing. The region as a whole is going to suffer immensely from Air Canada's decision. So I'd like it if in the next meeting, the mayor and I, or the mayor on his own, could draft a letter of support for the Northern New Brunswick Airport Authority, saying that we would like to participate in any efforts to bring in a new commercial carrier to keep our air link to the rest of the world alive and well, whether or not that's immediate or, after this. Anyway, that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, Stan, and the majority of people have no idea how important that airport really is to the economy of northern New Brunswick, and actually parts of Quebec as well. So I think anything we can do, and certainly we'll get a letter off and see what can be done there. Where's my thing? Tracy.
Oh, I just want to say that, that the airport kind of went silently into the night, and I think it would be a good idea to show our support and encourage a new carrier for sure. If I could just go back to 6.3.2 for a moment, none of us were asked to speak on it except Lillian, and if that would be, yeah.
That was my mistake. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay, that's okay. I guess I have two things. One is that, yes, we're looking at a potential $300,000 deficit or less in taxes and in our budget. And that's, I guess, what I'm hearing is that there's going to be either staff or service cuts. That's assuming. The barrier's been thrown out there as a potential cut. I can honestly say right here, it's not something that's on my radar. And I think that there's probably a lot of things that we can save on when we look in the budget, even without doing a zero-based budget. And saying that you want a zero-based budget and then losing a member, knowing how much work it is, and then losing a member of council working on it makes it that much tougher. Councillor Carmichael has always stepped away, and she's always, and I'm glad you've admitted that she's done good work. I would really like to find out what kind of precarious legal position we would be in. So if perhaps Landon, you could talk to our solicitor and find out, because I'm not a legal expert, so I would like to know where we would actually stand in that. Because as far as I can tell, the Municipalities Act say, that we should all work on it, and as long as you declare a conflict of interest for what you are particularly in conflict with, it is it's one line item on our budget. So I would just like to get all the information that there is to get.
Okay, thank you, Tracy. Nick, you had something.
So back to the airport issue. Councillor Killorn makes some good points. Of course, the Bathurst Airport was notorious for you never knew if your plane was going until you got there. And but rest assured, Foggy St. John will never close down. Maybe it's because in a different part of the province, and maybe that part of the province gets a little more attention than the northern part. I'm starting to think. I think you combine a whole bunch of things and say the leaders of northern New Brunswick probably have to get together and establish a whole new economic approach for the well-being of all, because I'm of the thought now that if we assume that provincial government is going to fix all these situations or come in on the White Stallion, that's just not going to happen. And I think the assumption is that we can absorb blow after blow after blow until we blow away.
Mayor Noel?
Thank you, Nick.
I'll just
Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
add my 5 cents to both. As far as the first one is concerned, I think Deputy Mayor Culligan makes 2 good points. First of all, I think it's going to be hard enough to do without having all of us there together to do. That's my opinion about it. Well, whichever route we take and whichever format we decide to choose, I think and the people I think expect everybody to be in that room. Not everybody is as vocal as everybody else. Not everybody has the expertise as everybody else. But everybody can add something and should. So I'd like to see, and the second point is, and I was going to mention it myself, but I didn't in the end, is I think it would be a good idea to contact Andre and see what he has to say, about legal jeopardy. So that's one point on that. And the second one, it's a good point about the airport. We tend to lose things here. It's death by 1,000 cuts, right? And this is just another one. And we should probably make our voices felt in whatever small way it is. At least it shows that we're engaged. So I think we should make our point of view known on that too. It's not good at all.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Stan.
Okay, I'd like to thank Councillor Divenborden for bringing up the regional issues at play here. It's always good. And I'm not being sarcastic. It is becoming glaringly obvious that that line wasn't just made with red and blue ink. So either way, moving on, Councillor Arsenault, thank you for your comment. I do believe it is kind of an all hands on deck. In fact, one of the recommendations, if we were doing a zero-based budget, is that we would bring in, we paid, I read through the audited reports in like 30 minutes last night. We paid $20,000 for that. That was unreal. The shallow breadth that they went into our books for. That was an instinctual, like just thinking about it made me kind of mad again. But to hire an accountant to bring us through this process one more time wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. A CPA would be great. And that person could definitely expedite the process of going through all this. And then that's where you get into the position where you're given choices, apples to apples, being this is how we procure parts for the tractor right now. You have the option to keep doing it this way or investigate this way with a new vendor, or go back to your current vendor and ask for a reduction. Those are all the types of things that come up in a zero-based budget. And yes, I don't have the expertise to do it. I'm only learning about it now. I wish I would have learned about it 4 years ago, or had that knowledge. I wish I would have done a better major than history. The other part would be, I want to emphasize for anybody who thinks that I'm attacking Councillor Carmichael, she's been a great counselor, attends all of the events in the community, volunteers. She was there helping me during the Lobster Festival. She was there during all the Beldoon days. She helped me cook the steaks and serve for all the fire departments. I don't want this to be an impugnment on her at all. I am worried, given our track record of getting sued for almost everything. And yes, maybe the answer is just going to Andre and getting the legal opinion first. But again, perceived conflict is almost as damaging as real conflict. And that's where my point of caution comes from. Beyond that, no, thanks guys. It was a good conversation. It's good to see you all.
I said earlier, I think that's the way we have to do budget. We have to have all 6 of us sitting in a room and going over things. And if we need outside help, so be it. But I think everyone has to really be involved this year and right from the start as well.
Okay, I've got quite a bit under my name, so I'll try to muscle through this as best I can. So the first item I have is the Social and Environmental Grant report. I believe there's a typo on this one, Brendo. I think that we had 250 for the Canadian Cancer Society. Okay, it's 230 on the motion, but it's actually 250 on the report. So 2 requests that came in. One was a little bit older for the Canadian Cancer Society Superwoman Walk. That was the one that I've brought up in previous meetings. And then we've also had a recent request for $250 from for the ALS Society of New Brunswick.
Okay, so for those 2, we need motion 2898. A mover and a seconder, please.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move that the Social and Environmental CAO Grant Report of July 2020 be accepted as presented, and the following recommendations approved: $250 to Canadian Cancer Society Superwoman Walk, and $250 ALS Society, New Brunswick.
Second.
Questions? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against, nay. Motion carried.
There was one request that came in that was over the threshold, so I've provided the information on that. Just a bit of history was Mr. Claude Doucet was appointed to the Shallure Bay Watershed Group, and he had initially reached out to us in hopes of having some summer student support, which we felt we were able to do. He was able to find students. They had adequate support personnel-wise, so he did ask for a monetary donation to this. So he did request $1,000. We left the motion open. I do believe, Brenda, that we have a little bit in that. I know that we were getting a little bit tight earlier in the year, but with COVID coming, then but the $1,000 we do have. It is available there, but we did leave the motion open just in case there was some discussion that wanted to be had.
Okay, before I bring the motion to the table, we'll wait for Sandon to come back. Okay. Okay, so we need a mover and seconder for motion 2099.
I'll move that council provides a $1,000 grant to Shallure Bay Watershed.
I'll second it.
Tracy, questions?
Mr. Mayor, what would have been the value of providing a student 1 day a week? $1,000, I bet.
I'd have to run the math. I'm not exactly sure. We actually got the job description from him before we were planning on, so we were actually arranging that 2 students go once per week. I'd have to do the mathematics there to figure out exactly what it was, but yeah, I don't know if it would be too far off.
So, yeah, okay.
Any other questions? Okay, if not on the comment, on the question, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Against, nay. 2 nay, 3 aye. Motion carried. Nays were Sandon and Paul.
Okay, the next item, we did have one residential grant application that came in. I had attached, all of the information on that. It's the Stephen and Tracy Huffman application, and the final grant allocation on that was $1,332.50.
Okay, so for that one, we need motion 21.
Beldoon Economic Development Bylaw, ED 01-2019, and the Residential Grant Policy Council accept. CAO Lee recommendations approve the following grants: Stephen and Tracy Huffman in the amount of $1,332.50.
I'll second.
Okay, second by Nick. Hey, questions?
Just one. Always curious about the newcomers to the village, and in this case, both these folks also. Are they retired people or are they younger couple?
I didn't actually meet them. This one is, normally I do meet all of the applicants. I don't believe that they're a retired couple. I don't believe that they are. At least by saying that, if they are, then I'm complimenting them. And if they do watch this, then.
They'll be watching tonight,
Right.
for sure.
But I will say, Nick, that, and just so that council is aware, this program has really gained a lot of traction. And even just today, we had 2 more come in. And I do know that there was there was a family from Ontario that had come out. So just giving council a heads up that it does really seem to be making some waves.
Any other questions? On the motion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Against, nay. Motion carried.
Okay, my next item, we have Roy Consultants that have completed the Phase 1 component of the Restigouche Street extension. And I do believe that we had a motion at the last council meeting to engage them for Phase 1. I'll be looking for the same motion to engage Roy Consultants for Phase 2. And the cost for the Phase 2 is $10,000.
Okay, so we need a mover and seconder for motion 2101.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move that Beldoon have Roy Consultants proceed with Phase 2 of the Restigouche Street extension as per the proposal received. REF number 242-19 dated June 11, 2020 for the amount of $10,500 plus HST.
I'll second it.
Questions? Sandon?
Where did we reach? Where was the final destination on the type of road we were putting in?
That's going to come up for
That's gonna-
discussion
yeah,
of
that's
the
gonna-
next point. We're going to be looking for direction from council on what it is. I can speak to that in just a minute.
Okay, that was it. Good, Paul?
Well, just sort of trying to carry on with, I don't know if you want to call it a philosophy or a direction that I've been trying to stay true to the last couple of months, and that is trying to encourage those who are going to get the most use from these, from the upgrades or whatever the other things that we do, to try and to ask them to sort of contribute, because to me it makes a commitment of some sort. So, I just wanted to give that prelude to my vote so people know where I'm coming from with that.
Nick?
Mr. Mayor, I think we can still support this motion, but adhere to the logic that Councillor Arsenault brings forward. We know that there's some big bucks attached to actually doing the physical work. This is basically the paperwork, and sometimes the paperwork is what you do at the end of your job. In this case, it's what you do at the beginning. But I think as the demand for property in the industrial park becomes in greater demand, I think those things need to be taken into consideration. But I think if we didn't plan for the extension of that road, that would also quickly put the kibosh on the attractiveness of the property that's still available.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, I guess the other item was, you want to speak on the
Sure,
on the
yeah,
hammerhead or the?
and I guess I can kind of tie it in here. So just for clarity for council, awarding the Phase 2 does not change, that they still need to be able to put together their design component of the road regardless of what council wants to do. So on the second point, this is more a directive to Roy Consultants. Because they've put that package together, they've offered a couple different options for council. In speaking with Francis Frenette, he wanted me to make sure that council was aware that essentially what he did was he kind of gave you the you know, essentially the most that you could do with that road. It's taking it all the way back. You know, he gave an option for a cul-de-sac and a hammerhead option. And again, he wanted council to be aware that, you know, if this was the way that you wanted to go, the cul-de-sac was more expensive. In speaking with DTI, they're absolutely fine with the hammerhead. A lot of municipalities are going that way to, you know, sort of reduce costs. But that first motion, the motion that I'm looking for, does not have any impact on what design. Francis wanted to make sure that you understood that you could really do anything up to and including that. So if you're only looking for, you know, a road to, you know, a crossing over the tracks, and, you know, access to the first land, that's no problem. He can do that when he does his detailed phase, which he has in here, that's what he'll do. So the numbers that he's provided is essentially, that's to take it to, you know, as far as you can go, but you can do anything in between, essentially, and something else, just so council's aware, I have actually gone through the process of applying for funding. I'm working different channels here for infrastructure funding. So it's, you know, I don't expect to hear anything early, but we are doing our due diligence to make sure that we're trying to capitalize on whatever funding is out there on this. And I did actually ask for a pretty substantial amount, so hopefully there are a couple opportunities that come up where something like this is subsidized.
Yeah, and I think for council, the fact that we have someone interested in that second property as well, I mean, it's very early now and it may or may not happen, but we're going to need access to it. So I think while we're there, if we go, so there would be access to that second property and then the hammerhead turn, because most of our other places do have hammerhead turns, and that's seems to work quite well for us, and that is a little bit cheaper. So that's what I would recommend to council as well. Any other questions? Okay. Okay, on the motion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Against, nay?
Nay.
Nay, all. Motion carried.
Okay, my next item, I've put out all the information to council. This is essentially the final CCO to wrap up Phase 1. I was talking to the contractor today. As I mentioned to council previously, there was some programming work that needed to be done that we did hold some money back on, which is actually anticipating it's supposed to be done either this week or next week. And that's actually lining right up with our Phase 2. We're getting prepared to wrap up finalization on Phase 2 as well. This last CCO is the one that we had sort of put off until we had a better understanding of sort of what was entailed in it. But this really will wrap up outside of our $5,000 holdback, wraps up the Phase 1 component of the construction.
Okay, so we need a mover and a seconder for motion 2102.
I move that the Belledune Council approve the release of payment of Genabel for the Phase 1 building renovation outlined in change order CCO 68 for the amount of $35,142.85 plus HST.
Second by Tracy. Questions?
Nope.
Go ahead.
I'm going to vote no, but just so it's on the record, so they understand that I'm still angry about them being late on the last project.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Well, I thought I was going to be the only one voting no, but I'm voting no too. And the only reason, it's more symbolic than anything. I think at this point, I've talked about how we need to have an audit, I believe, an independent audit, and I appreciate the mayor's comments last time. He's probably correct in terms of when that's already being done, but I think a project of this size, especially just sort of tailing the comments that Councillor Killorn made about an hour ago in terms of trying to be accountable for the spending that we have. I just want us, I think it's important, I think we need to have an independent audit, whatever form and shape that is. And so seeing that this is the final payment on phase one, I'll make a symbolic no in terms of I would love to see having an audit independent audit attached to it. So that's why I'm going to throw a no in there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Any other questions? Nick?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I think we probably all share some of the sentiment, but there's certainly a problem if more than two of us decide to vote no. That's like denying someone their wages after they've worked for you for a year. So, and I do like the way that our CAO has handled the situation. I think he's done an admirable job considering what he picked up, what he was left with, and how he's managed through it. And I feel very confident that he's held Jenna
Bells, you're all right.
that he's held her feet to the fire, and so I think another no would be would suggest that we don't like all the work that he's done. So, and I think he's done it admirably. So, well, I for one will do my best to make sure that this motion passes.
Yeah, I kind of feel like we'd leave Landon up the creek without a paddle if the three of us decided to vote no. So, yeah, we won't do that to you, Landon.
Okay.
The same way as the other two. We have to pay our bills. We weren't happy with this project, but Landon did an amazing job when he picked it up and moved forward with it. Thank you for everything you've done. But yeah, we kind of got to pay the people, whether we want to or not.
Okay, on the motion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Against, nay. Motion carried. Paul and Sandon, nay, and Lillian, Tracy, and Nick, nay, yay.
Okay, my next item is for the Mitchell and Lawler Road intersection that was completed. The letter of recommendation that was provided from Gemtech is to award the project to St. Isidore Asphalt. There was only one bid on the project. Councillor Ivanvoorden, to your request, there was an executive summary that was provided to try to describe as best they could with what was going to happen with that intersection and how the public safety would be increased. But as for anything visual, they were kind of restricted on what they were able to put together. However, that's the letter of recommendation that did come in, and the price is $95,858.25, including tax.
Okay, so we need a mover and a seconder for motion 2103.
I'll move it to get it out there so we can discuss it. Move that Beldoon Council accept the recommendations of Gemtech file 10002.04 dated July 14th, 2020 to award the Mitchell-Lawler Road intersection upgrade to the only bidder, St. Isidore Asphalt Limited, for the amount of $95,858.25, HST included.
I'll second it.
Okay, moved and seconded. Questions?
What was the, what did the potential, what was it supposed to be? What did the engineering costs come in at?
The construction cost, I want to say it was $68,000 plus HST.
So we're almost $30,000 over what was estimated.
Yeah, it was I think it was about a 15, when you calculate the tax into it, I think it was about a $15,000 or $20,000 difference, yeah.
Yikes. And this is a permanent solution? Or is it a really expensive Band-Aid?
This was the most cost-effective solution. If, in their proposal, I do believe that they put in a couple different options. One of them where they felt the most significant impact was to raise the line of sight and to raise the center of the road, because that's really where they felt, I believe they came in at around a $400,000 price tag on their construction estimate for this. This second option that they provided was more of trying to widen out the road as much as possible, widen the shoulders out, widen the pavement out to allow for, better lines of sight and a little bit more leniency when you have vehicles crossing each other, essentially is.
And just one last question, any guesses as to why we only got one bid?
I have no idea. They were surprised as well, yeah. But
Is it just timing,
I
like
don't know if it's
COVID
just the
timing, or
season.
what,
It
like?
could be.
It's summer.
Yeah, summer, I couldn't speak to it. They were surprised as well. And I think this was the first time that we only ever had one bid, and we usually get some competitive pricing in.
Did we ever put in that, that addendum that we can refuse and go back out?
Oh, yeah, this doesn't, yeah, I mean, they've got it written to the package then.
I don't think we're gonna get a better price next week. We might get a better price in the fall. I perused the executive summary. They don't necessarily know if, speed is the question here. This will help a little bit because they're changing the angle a bit, so you're not sliding as much when you're coming through at 80. But it's a Band-Aid. And I guess it's up to council to decide whether or not they want to spend 90-some thousand on a Band-Aid?
$95,000.
$95,000
No,
on a
96
Band-Aid?
almost, yeah.
And just because this is going to foreshadow, for the people in Mitchell who were really going to have another vote about whether or not we spend $20,000 on looking at getting them internet, just so that's there in your mind already.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If we were to spend $100,000, let's say, on every treacherous piece of road that we have in the village, we'd probably blaze through $1 million pretty quickly. The reality is that there is a 40-kilometer-an-hour speed limit there. Probably not adhere to most of the time. And I understand, I can see that if a school bus and a tractor trailer are going in opposite directions on a snowy day. However, I think that there are other solutions, much cheaper, that can still serve the purpose, and even if it means restricting the speed limit to 30 kilometers an hour for, okay, it's going to take 5 seconds longer to get home, or to get out, but I'm a little worried. Spend $95,000 and say, was that money well spent? And I haven't been able to convince myself since the figures came out. And it's part of life in rural New Brunswick, rural Beldoon. I guess you come across those situations everywhere.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Anyone else? Okay, on the motion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Against, nay?
Nay,
We have three
I'd like
nays.
to see it go
Nick?
back out.
Tracy and Sandon? Three? Okay, so motion defeated.
Okay, and so the last point for me is on the Nova Communications, and we're just looking for the Phase 1 study for council, a decision on that. I think that all the information has been put out there. Nova representatives have made themselves available, so hopefully council has had an opportunity to bounce a couple ideas off of them. So we've got the Nova Communications Phase 1 study for rural broadband for Beldoon.
I'll move that Beldoon Council retain the services of Nova Communications, a division of Rock Networks, to proceed with Phase 1 Rural Broadband Site Survey Village of Belledune for the amount of $26,900 plus HST, as per terms and conditions specified in quote 00009395 dated June 9th, 2020.
I'll second it.
Questions?
If this goes through in the end, oh, sorry, Nick.
Nick was first.
No, go ahead.
Tracy, go ahead.
Usually the person who makes the motion gets to go first, actually, but
Except you turned the light off and you turned yours on.
you can't turn your light off. That's where problems start. I was really on the fence on this one here, but I had a good conversation with CAOD the other day, enlightened me a little bit on things that I'm very, very unfamiliar with, and was able to, well, I think I came away from the conversation seeing this as perhaps a good investment for the future, and I just denied a budgetary item or potential cost to the village of $95,000. Here I'm coming back with probably going to vote in favor of a $26,000. It's quite a difference in value, but I see this as the long-term implications and impact of this to be to bode well for future communications of the village, and the likelihood that we could access funding through a host of federal agencies makes it that much more attractive. And so I think that might be our cost up front, but I think a lot of that is recoverable if we put our foot to the pedal.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Tracy?
I was just going to say, if it does go through in the very end, it might be a little bit of a solution for our Mitchell Road, because we could put a CCTV camera up there and catch the people who are speeding. It might slow people down, I don't know, but it is a possibility, so.
Okay. Nick, or no, Sandra, Paul.
Oh, Paul was first.
Paul's first, yeah. Sorry.
Okay. Well, I've got an almost perfect record of saying no tonight. So, but in all seriousness, I know I'm like all the council, I had a chance to see the presentation last week. I also had a chance this afternoon to speak with a couple of people from Nova. They were nice enough to call me back. We had a conversation. I've got a couple of really, for me, there, and I would love to see this thing happen and all the benefits. And last month, when we had this first came to the table, Councillor Cloran made some good points. He made some, and other council members too, I think, chimed in. I think Belledune has had some opportunities slip through their fingers. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I don't think we're all going to agree, though, on what those opportunities were. But I think we can agree that there were probably some. And there's no doubt that, you know, the service here is not up to where it should be, and it's probably a factor in, and will become a factor in terms of us trying to get our economy back to where it should be. My two biggest concerns is that I think that you can agree that this is a good thing and not necessarily believe that this is the company to do it. And my two concerns are, one, there's no body of work. The only example that I've been given is Pictou, and in speaking with one of the representatives this afternoon, that's not a completed project. So there's no data telling us, any anecdotal evidence telling us that how this economic boom is going to affect how it relates to us. There's no track record from what I can see, because I asked the question, unless they maybe just misunderstood. But in terms of being able to attain funding, and my fear is that this will be another ATV Trails, where that project started 6 years ago, and I received an email the other day. I was thanking CAOLE for being able to lead me to Mr. Willett, who gave me this information. I asked him point blank, I said, in terms of percentage, where are we in terms of being finished in this project? And I believe the answer was 50%. And how are we doing in funding? Well, not going so well. So I can see a lot of similarities. I know it's apples and oranges, but, you know, there's a very real possibility that we're going to get into this and have to end up funding the vast majority of the project. And that, I don't think we're in a position to do that. And I don't think we can say for sure, not even 75% or 50%, that that's not going to end up being the case. I love the idea. I think it's a great idea. I'm just not sure that we should be doing it without having somebody come back with a body of work saying, we've done this, we've succeeded. Look at the anecdotal evidence about this, how this municipality's economy has increased and how it's grown. Without that, the cost of this project for me is too much. But I respect the fact that other council members would have confidence in it. And if that's the way the council feels, then great, but for me, it'll be a no, respectfully.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. Sandon?
I'll settle in for a little story here. Unlike Councillor Davenport, but a little bit unlike him, I've been blessed with a healthy dose of skepticism. I wasn't overly sold on Maritime Iron. I didn't think they had the ability to cross the finish line anyway, but I figured someone would buy them out if they got close enough. That was my hope. These guys give me the same impression, that I'm not 100% sure that they're going to be around for the long term, but I know that the technology that they're peddling is of a significant enough value that somebody's going to buy them. They're not going to disappear one day and just be gone. If they end up going, you know, business going under, they're going to be bought. But just in terms of a story, so when the Contendo office was open down in Jack River at the DNR building, we had okay broadband. Very slow upload speed, which made it very hard to program to upload updates to software that's all web-based. This is apropos of nothing. I don't expect Baldoon to, you know, blow up into the new tech hub, even though I like to brag that per capita at one point we had more tech people living here than San Francisco. But when I called to ask if we could get a dedicated fiber line brought into the office, very similar to the type of line that they drug into here, the first thing that I was told is that I had to pay for a survey. They had to come in and assess the land, the distance from the existing lines, the hubs that they could install on, and things of that nature. And that was going to cost me X number of dollars already. All very useful information, whether or not you're dealing with rock or you're dealing with somebody else. So if this survey is going to go ahead and get done, it is the inevitable first step on this process. As for the boon in economic activity, I've seen a community I used to live in, Valley View, has Wi-Fi in their town core in Alberta. It's not creating a boon in activity, but what it has done is it's allowed people of lower income to access high-speed internet at relatively low to no cost. And that has, in turn, availed them to online training, online learning. And I think probably the biggest thing that we can look at is do not view this as an economic catalyst. It's going to be a useful tool, but in the days of COVID and the future of telecare and online physician meetings and buying grandma an iPad so she can talk to her doctor, it is critical that everybody in the town has access to the high-speed internet so that can happen. Because as that progresses, as that gets more and more adopted, regional clinics are probably a little more at risk. So the one thing we can do is cover our bases by figuring out a way to make sure that everybody has access to broadband internet and can access healthcare services. Otherwise, why would you live here in your golden years? That's probably my biggest reason for pursuing the project. It's going to be long past my time when it comes to fruition, but I hope it goes through.
Okay, thank you, Sandon. Lillian?
All good comments, all good facts. For me, I didn't understand anything about it, as Sandon said at the last meeting, but after sitting into the conversation, very interesting, a lot of information. It's a lot of money to get started up, but I think that it's our future. It's the future for the people of this area and the hopefully surrounding area. I guess you got to spend money to make money, and apparently there's a lot of money out there for internet or broadband or whatever you want to call it, so, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Tracy?
I was just going to say, I guess one of the really valuable things that COVID has taught us is, or has proved to us, is how much we need to rely on internet to get a lot of work done. I mean, I know so many people who worked from home, including myself, and keeping in touch with family members and, like Sandon was saying, you know, talking to grandma in the home. I mean, all of that. So we really, in the last, since March, relied so heavily on internet. And I think that you're going to see, because we learned during the lockdown that we can do so many of these jobs on the internet that we weren't really sure, but we were pushed to find out. And now we have found out that they can be done from home or from a distance. And I think you're going to see a move towards that. Whether or not, you know, they need to or not, I think it's just going to be one of those things that's inevitable, where people are going to move to working online. And this, I think, would open so many doors to working from home and establishing small businesses and learning from home. I know just even with our college, we're talking about doing all online learning in the fall, and that would be open to, we could teach everybody in the province then, not just locals. And so I can't see it being anything but good. I appreciate Paul's concerns about there not being, you know, a history of this company. But it's still, at least to me, and maybe I'm just being naive, but it's still you know, a newish endeavor, you know, in companies doing this. So they gave, I thought, a very detailed presentation, and I went into it pretty skeptical. And I have to say, they won me over. They answered so many questions and cleared up so just many things that were in the dark for me, you know. And so I don't know. They're good at presenting. They did win me over. So.
Okay, thank you, Tracy. Nick?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'll just reiterate what Councillor Arsenault said, in that I had some skepticism also when all and only references were to Picton, Nova Scotia, and I kind of had to tell myself, maybe that's because you can't really write up a resume until you've had a first job, so maybe that's the situation they find themselves in. And I always like to support investments that I can say this could ultimately, one way or another, contribute to the growth of our community. And yeah, this might be a bit of a long shot, but I think the value, I think the cost is probably justifiable. It's probably right there on the border for me, and therefore I feel confident in supporting it, and I feel very confident also that we'll be able to retrieve some of that initial expenditure through some fancy footwork on the part of CAOD.
Okay, thank you, Nick. No other questions on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against, nay. Motion carried, 1 nay. Paul? Okay. 7.2, Clerk Treasurer Cormier.
Okay, I'll be the financial report. I'll do the utility operating fund first. As of June 1st to 30th, we had a balance that carried forward of $21,126.97, deposits of $3,453.92, e-payments of $550, and interest of $12.20. for total deposits of $4,016.12. We had checks that were issued from June 1st to the 30th of $850.27 and an e-transfer payment of $3,932.23. The checks outstanding in May that had cleared, $423.61, and checks outstanding in June, $354.18, leaving a current account balance in the operating fund of $20,291.16. Capital reserve account balance was $40,739.95. Operating reserve account balance was $6,851.88, and trust account balance was $28,371.85. There were no outstanding accounts payable at the end of June. As for accounts receivable, we had the first, on the residential side, we had the first quarter, January to March, $250 due. April to June residential was $750 due, and then we had the July to September residential of $2,500, and for May, the industrial was $3,813.31. On the general operating fund, from June 1st to the 30th, 2020, we had a bank balance in May of $152,023, deposits of $1,499.92, direct payments of $1,150, direct deposits from the province, $337,047. This was the assessment less, the provincial amount less the cost of assessments, which they deduct during the month of June. We had campground cash deposits of $1,372.10 and campground e-transfers of $8,243.96. Interest revenue of $224.30 for total deposits of $349,537.28. The checks issued from June 1st to the 30th were $182,333.90. Accounts payable direct payment of $2,991.89. Refund on a rental of $57.50. E-transfer payments of $379.93. Direct payment service New Brunswick $10. Direct payment to work health and safety $7,490.54. This was for the month of April, May, and June, because during the COVID, WorkSafe New Brunswick did not take any payments from the businesses for those 3 months, but they collected it all at one time. Bank charges, service was $32.95, and the MasterCard payment was $1,292.21. We had checks that were cleared from May, outstanding of $37,676.19, and checks that were still outstanding in June of $31,234.44, leaving a current account balance as of June 30th of $300,529.61 in the operating fund. The capital reserve account balance was $1,930,582.37, and the gas tax fund balance was $233,147.03. Current accounts payable at the end of June was $194,246.28. Accounts receivable at 2019, we still had $115 that was outstanding to be received, and for the 2020, we had $20,289.13. The details on all those are also included in all council's packages so that they know what those are.
Okay, so we need motion 2105. Moved and seconded, please.
I'll move that the financial report be accepted as presented and the accounts payable be paid.
I'll second it.
Questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Against, nay? Who's the nay? Sandon? One nay, Sandon. Motion carried. Okay, the next one is under bylaws and policies is the dangerous on-site premises, motion 2106. A mover and a seconder, please.
I'll move the following resolution regarding PID 500-73931 be adopted as presented. Resolution, whereas the enforcement officer has submitted a report dated July 16th, 2020 concerning the property located on Main Street and bearing PID 500-73931, whereas the enforcement officer is in the opinion that the building on this property constitutes a hazard to the safety of the public by reason of dilapidation or unsoundness of structural strength under the meaning of bylaw DUP 09-2011. Whereas council concurs with the recommended actions outlined in section D of the report, that the notice to comply drafted by the enforcement officer be sent to the property owner.
Okay, we have a seconder?
I'll second it.
Questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, go ahead.
can the property be identified here?
It's in your package.
I know where it is. But,
Are we allowed to say it in public? I think is what you're...
right,
Yeah, I don't see
okay,
why not.
so we're talking about the old Winton place
Yeah.
I only hope, I mean, this is a great letter, and I hope it's a start, but I sure hope that things don't have to get to that level of dilapidation before letters are issued, because else the enforcement officer is not going to be very busy, and he should be really busy.
Okay. Any other questions? On the motion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Against, nay. Motion carried. Okay, next is correspondence.
The correspondence in, we had the Restigouche SPCA June report, the Atlantic Railway track inspection July report, tourism, heritage, and culture. There was tickets to Acadian Village. 6 of those were sent into the municipality. And the magazines, we had Municipal World for June and July and Infrastructure Magazine.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move that the meeting adjourn at 8:43.
So I'll second
Miss-
it.
Yeah, I was going to second it and remind Mallory to take the laundry out of the washer.